It was a mystery that tortured two families, terrified a small community, and touched the world. The murders of two young girls, Abby Williams and Libby German. The case became known as the Delphi murders. The setting, a small Indiana town of just 3,000 people. From the beginning, investigators suspected it was someone local, which made it even more difficult for everyone from this small community. It all started on February 13th, 2017, when Libby and Abby went hiking. The two teenagers were good friends and had the day off from school. The weather was unseasonably warm. But when Libby and Abby did not show up when they were supposed to get picked up, their families began to worry, and they began to search. The next day, the bodies of these two young girls were found, both victims of murder. Then over the course of the next 5 years, there were no answers, no arrests, just a series of disjointed clues, like two sketches that looked nothing alike, a video of the suspected killer, and a short audio recording of his voice.
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
Then things got even stranger when police said they were looking for anyone connected to an Anthony Schatz social media account, which was not connected to the male model in the photos. Then the man behind that account was arrested for child pornography. But still, there were no arrests for the double murder until now. Today, investigators made the official announcement, fighting off the tears and the emotion that has driven this case.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation.
So who is this alleged killer? What did he look like? Where is he from? Tonight, all the latest information from the dramatic announcement of an arrest in the Delphi murder case.
It took a long time to get here. A long time. But it's happened. It has happened. And today was the day where the official announcement was made that, yes, there was an arrest. But let's take a step back for a minute and remember what this is truly about, an unimaginable loss. 2 young girls young teenagers, what would they be doing now? Where would they be? What would they be looking to do with the rest of their lives? All that is gone. Gone, disappeared. Because someone chose to take their lives, to rob them of their futures, and then put two families through this incredibly awful process of looking for a killer and seeking justice, and all along carrying with you that void that now exists in your life for the rest of your life. The loss, the unimaginable loss of these 2 girls. This is a case that transformed from, I don't want to say simple murder, there are no simple murders, but from a local investigation into a true crime mystery. And it is something that went around the globe and around the globe again. And for 5 years, people talked about it, people wrote about it, people did podcasts about it. Shows like ours continued to cover the story because there was no arrest, which meant a couple of things. One, no answer, no justice for the families, fear in the community. Actually, it's even more. And it comes to a point where there is a killer on the loose. And think about that and the prospect of someone who would go take the lives of these 2 young girls. still being out there. And imagine living there and having a child. Luckily, though, and part of this is that because this became a true crime mystery and everyone continued to talk about it, not forget it, put it in the headlines, put it online, put it on the local news, put it on the national media, this was never a cold case. Never became a cold case. And investigators reminded us of that all the time, and they would release different clues, little bits and pieces. But the way they were doing this investigation is they didn't want to give it all up because they felt somehow that would impede their ability, but they wanted to give enough to keep it alive, to keep the interest, to keep the tips coming in, people paying attention to what's going on, not letting it go cold. And it never did. And that's why today we had this announcement that someone was arrested. And this does a lot for the families of Libby and Abby, obviously. But it gives hope to others. Other families who have been suffering around the nation. We cover all these stories. And for all of them, there's two lessons here that are so incredibly important. One is the media is not the enemy when it comes to unsolved murders, missing people, not the enemy at all. Use us, please use us. Let us tell the story, let us remind people, let us shake the trees up a little bit to see if a leaf is gonna fall down. How many times have we covered trials here where it was a podcast that suddenly caught fire and then everyone was talking about it and then someone talked who knew something and all of a sudden there's an arrest. It can happen. It absolutely can happen. And I think everyone knew it was going to happen in this case. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. The when was longer than we thought, but it happened. Today was the day. And other families out there should retain that hope, and investigators and departments around the nation should keep the case alive as well. Don't let it go cold. Give us updates. That's what they did in this case. Little piece here, little piece there. Just enough to keep the public aware, to give hope to those families. Let's take a listen now to the state superintendent, who was emotional today, the sheriff, and also the DA, the prosecutor, all speaking today about this arrest. I mean, this is a very big day.
Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation. I am proud to report to you that today, actually last Friday, was the day. We are going to continue a very methodical and committed approach to ensure that if any other person had any involvement in these murders in any way, that person or persons will be held accountable. I really believe that Abby and Libby would be proud of you for standing strong, even in the face of immense pressure and perpetual criticism. And I hope you have found just a bit of peace in this most complicated world. I stand before you in this church and very place where we held our first briefing nearly 6 years ago, and just hours after the murders of Abby and Libby. Right here. Pulling in today, I wasn't really sure what emotion I would experience, but peace came over me, and I didn't expect that to happen. And I hope all of you, with all the different responsibilities you have from around the planet today, have felt some of that as well. What we all have experienced proves that together there's nothing we cannot do. But more importantly, Giving of ourselves, all of us, giving of ourselves matters more than what we could ever receive. Abby and Libby, though in death, have had a profound effect on so many of us, on how we live, and as importantly, who we all should be.
I believe in a God of justice and righteousness. Today, I believe that same God has provided us justice for Abby and Libby.
There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28th, 2022. Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them.
You could feel that emotion, not even being there. But let's bring in Court TV Crime and Justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who's joining us live tonight from Delphi, Indiana. He was there for all of this. I have some questions for you, but first, can you talk about just what we just saw and what we just heard, and bring a sense of the emotion? Is that what that's what I was taking from this, that this was like very personal, and this was raw emotion from investigators and prosecutors and sheriffs.
Yeah, hey, Vinny. And you know what? It's kind of still a mystery on this Halloween night, right? And you had that room full of people, journalists from all across the country, no doubt. And also church members, you had people from the community, you had people that drove into town to be there because they're so invested in this case. At one point, I thought it was going to be standing room only. You had the family members sitting there listening, not getting a whole lot of answers. We still don't know the why, but we might just know the who because of this arrest. And what do we know about him, right, Vinny? So we know his name, Richard Allen, 50 years old, lived in this community, Delphi, Indiana, small town for quite some time, charged with 2 counts of murder. We know that for the little girls. Worked at a local pharmacy here in town, and he was married, and he also had a daughter of his own. Take a look at this video. We went to that pharmacy where he has worked, and we've confirmed that. We went to the pharmacy. They said no comment when we went inside. There was a security guard in place. We're told that there was actually a poster of the suspect hanging inside at one point near where he worked, where he interacted with people. This store is located at the bridge entrance, that trail entrance, not too far from there. CBS, we reached out to them. Again, they confirmed that in fact he did work there. They released this statement. In part it reads, "As members of the Carroll County community, we remain devastated by these murders, and our hearts go out to German and Williams' families. We are shocked and saddened to learn that one of our store employees was arrested as a suspect in these crimes. We stand ready to cooperate with police in investigating in any way that we can." After the news conference, Libby German's grandparents, Mike and Becky Patty, they had an interaction. They said that they had an interaction with him at some point at the store, and they talked to reporters about it. Take a listen.
There's a report going around right now that this Mr. Allen actually processing photos for the family at this CBS. Do you know if that's accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay, and that he didn't charge the family when they came in to claim the photos?
That is correct.
Okay.
They were having photos developed for the funerals of little Abby and Libby. It was for their funerals. And so he said, sure, you don't have to pay for these photos. That was the interaction. It's just really creepy.
Creepy, chilling. I did not realize it was the photos for the funeral. That is wow. And just nonchalantly. And you know, the other part of this, you know, you're there. I mean, it's a small town. So chances were, and I think throughout all this, the family was wondering, you know, do I know this person? Is this someone that I've interacted with? And the answer is yes.
The answer is yes. And, you know, this is pretty much the town right here behind me. This is the town square. This is the county seat, which makes it unusual as well because it is such a small town. This is the courthouse where he may stand trial right here behind me. And tonight on Halloween, other families are celebrating. These two families are not, because they still are searching for answers and they are not able to celebrate an American holiday with their kids. And you know, I've said this earlier today, and police pretty much paraphrased it this way too. This was a monster living in plain sight in this small town. And so, you know, to have this news drop on Halloween was something as well.
Absolutely.
It's just surreal. Yeah.
So, any other reaction that you came across today, either from the family, from the community, to what happened here and what the announcement is? And is it true that the family knows as little as we know at this point, or do we know if they've been privy to more information?
I know that you've interviewed family members quite a lot over the past couple of years. I have too, even before working with Court TV with my podcast. And, you know, all along the way they said pretty much we know what the public knows. They've been so tight-lipped in this investigation, like they were today. The arrest affidavit, it's sealed. We're not going to get any details as to the motive in this or cause of death, at least for now. And family members, they were expected to talk at this news conference, but they didn't. They were all seated in, some of them in the front rows. I interacted with a few in the back. We're all respectful. We didn't ask them questions, but it was Libby's grandparents that did want to address the media because they wanted to say thank you to a lot of people. And they also said this. Take a listen.
I want to make sure we get as much information to the investigators, and specifically the prosecutor, specifically at this time moving forward. So with all your guys' help, keep the information out there and keep the girl's name out there. And again, any information pertaining to anything with this case, you know, obviously with the person arrested, but anything at all, you know, please call that in. Please turn those tips in, because I want to make sure that that's how we support as a family, right, is keep it out there, asking for help, and you guys carry that message back out there for us, and we are so appreciative of that.
So during that, Vinny, my ears kind of perked up because it's similar to what we just heard, right? It's similar to what state police investigators and also the prosecutors that are handling this case were saying. If there's other people involved in this, we're coming after you. So they're keeping those tip lines open for this case.
And you may get some fresh tips because now you've got someone associated with it. So if anyone knows anything about this guy, about Alan, they'll perhaps come forward and be able to paint a clearer picture for investigators and maybe take them down some roads that they didn't know about before. Before I let you go, how about the community today? As you mentioned, it's Halloween. I know a lot of families are focused on that, but this has been such a big part of this community looking for an answer and probably looking to exhale a little bit that a child killer maybe have taken off of the streets of Delphi.
Well, people are bringing us or offering us food. People are saying thank you for being here. Everybody's so invested in this case. This has been something that has ripped this community apart and then brought it back together 3 times over. When my producer and I, Anna, we got into town yesterday and we immediately went to the trail area. And you can see that there are several memorials along the way. There's even a park dedicated to the kids. And then we started talking to a lot of people that started showing up, and they're placing flowers and they're leaving little gifts. And everyone's really emotional. And if you listen to this, you can get a sense of the mood here. Take a listen.
Every time I travel from Logansport to Lafayette, I pass under the Freedom Bridge. I always say a prayer that they find out who did this to those little girls. And today is the day. Today is the day.
Today is the day is the slogan that they've been using for almost 6 years, 5.5 years. That's the image that you see when you see these memorials. People write it. Kelsey, the sister of Libby, wrote it in a text that we were talking about when she announced that there was going to be an announcement today when the family knew on Friday. And today was the day. Yeah, we didn't get all the answers that we want. I don't know if we ever will. But today, at least, we know that there was an arrest for these murders. So today is the day for this community, Vinny.
Matt Johnson reporting live tonight from Delphi, Indiana. Great job, Matt. Glad you were there and appreciate it. We'll talk again. All right, folks, we've got a lot more to get to. When we come back, we're going to bring in the hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast who have been breaking news on this for years. Erica Morse, private investigator as well. Also, coming up next hour. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, convicted mass murderer Darrell Brooks back in court after being found responsible for the Christmas parade massacre, and once again raising his voice in court as he continues to represent himself. We have the latest.
I just want the truth to be told. That should not be sealed. If everything else could be open to the public, then the public should know that I had a shock device on my ankles.
Fate of the Parkland school shooter.
Life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Emotional victim impact statements.
You set a precedent for the next mass killing, and nothing happens to you. That's not okay.
I'm stunned. The grief is overwhelming.
17 beautiful lives were cut short, and the monster that killed them gets to live another day.
The Parkland School Massacre Sentencing. Live coverage Tuesday morning at 9/8 Central on Court.
How do you feel that the suspect could be a neighbor, could be somebody you've known?
Well, Doug Carter said that early on, if you recall. He said he's hiding in plain sight, and that's the case.
Hiding in plain sight. That's what we're talking about here. The Delphi murders. The man who investigators believe is responsible for the murder of Abby and Libby, his name is Richard Allen. He's in the middle. Those were the sketches that we were dealing with through the years. I don't know, is the nose kind of similar to the one on the right? It's very different than the one on the left. I don't know. But those are two of the clues, but the man in the middle is one who was arrested. Take a look at his home here in Delphi, Indiana. We have some video of that. That's where he lived, apparently with his family, which is, you know, he had a child, he had a wife. Looks pretty normal. Nothing would strike you, right? Just another house in a small town. Let me show you, though, where it's located relative to the Monon High Bridge Trail, where Abby and Libby went to. So this is Delphi, Indiana. There you've got his home, close to the middle school where the kids went, half a mile away from there. And then about 2.5 miles away from the Monon High Bridge Trail, as you take a look there. But that's driving. You know, walking, it's actually even closer if you walked it. Incredibly close to all of us. This is a small town, hiding in plain sight. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us tonight from Indianapolis, Indiana, hosts of the Murder Sheet podcast, Anya Kane and Kevin Greenlee back with us, and in Chicago, Illinois, private investigator Erica Morse. Thank you, everyone. So we've got a name now. We've got a photograph. We've got some information about him. What are your thoughts? What's going through your mind tonight, Anya and Kevin, as this new information? You've been so deep inside this case for so long. What's going through your minds tonight?
I think we're feeling a lot of hope right now, and that was something that we saw from the residents at Delphi as well. The fact that police have made this step of going public with this arrest and charging someone with the murders, I mean, is huge. And this is what the families and the community has been waiting for. But I think we weigh that with, there's also so many unanswered questions. And the fact that police are stressing that they still need help and they still need the public to possibly send in tips, and they're still actively investigating, certainly makes us wonder, what else could we be seeing? Is this them trying to tie up loose ends to make it a very strong case for the prosecutor? Or are they suspecting that more people could possibly be culpable somehow in this case?
You know, Erica, I have one question for you, what your thoughts are. Do you think that they're still investigating and believe others are involved, or do you think they're potentially looking for other victims?
Both, Vinny. I'm an Indiana girl born and raised, and have followed this case very closely. As a matter of fact, I've turned in 2 tips on this case. One from your TV program, actually. And one of the things that has never made sense is that there were too many people involved in the person of interest angle. We had multiple sketches, we had Keegan Kline, we had Ron Logan, and one of my colleagues is extremely insistent that Ron Logan has been involved. Well, I've been talking with people on the ground in Delphi today because, you know, investigators, advocates, forensics, we're all good friends in the true crime community. And the consensus down there is a reason why the tip line is still being pushed. We expect that other victims could come forward. This man was not only a pharmacy tech, but he was a manager at the CVS. He had clear access to anybody in that town. If my understanding, it's the only pharmacy in that town. And we're also now looking at other cases. Our team has gone back over the weekend and reopened cold case files saying, wait a minute, this makes sense. The timeline adds up. The age adds up. We're not done, Vinny. This is just the beginning.
Let me ask you, Kevin, to me, that chilling detail today, that he had processed the photos for the funeral that Matt just told us about, and the fact that he has access to people who are having photos processed. And then I think about some of the other aspects of this case. I don't know where this leads to, but to me, I don't know if that's necessarily, you know, a coincidence.
Yeah, it's downright eerie because when you take your film in to be developed at the neighborhood drugstore or whatever, you're trusting them with some of your most intimate memories, some of your most important moments in your life that you want to preserve. And you trust them with that. And to find out that the person who is doing that for you might be doing it to search for potential prey is just simply horrifying.
Yeah, Erica, what are your thoughts now? And again, you know, they're looking for potential connections to others. We still have that information that was out there about this Anthony Schatz social media account that somehow is connected to child pornography. This guy is processing photos. I think there are more pieces here to put together somehow, some way.
There absolutely are more pieces to put together, Vinny. I was told by someone on the ground in Delphi that not only was he processing those photos at no charge and told the family no charge, but when family members would come into CVS, Richard Allen was actually seeking them out in the aisles and would go speak with them. And there, you know, all of this stuff doesn't necessarily come to mind right away because these families are traumatized and they don't necessarily remember who they interacted with over the last 5 and 5.5 years. And now they're thinking, wait a minute, I remember that conversation. I remember someone coming up to me and paying special attention to me in the aisle. This predator, this particular predator, enjoyed that interaction to the extent that he put himself in the middle of it and made himself available to the family and police by offering his assistance with these photos. I don't know if you saw that picture of inside the house. That sketch was sitting behind him. I mean, this is someone who was front and center, as police stated, and they always believed, someone who was hiding in plain sight.
And Anya, final word from you on this. The fact that it was someone that was from the town, small town, everyone seemed to think that all along. Was this someone who was on anyone's radar at all?
He certainly wasn't on our radar, Vinny. We first heard the name Richard Allen on Friday when this was basically broken. So, and we've talked to other folks in the media, internet sleuths who studied this very carefully. We haven't found anyone yet who had this name on their list. That doesn't mean nobody's out there, and it doesn't mean that the investigators didn't have some sort of interaction with him early on. But it certainly seems from what we were hearing that this kind of took everyone by surprise.
And this was the photo that Erica was, oh, it's gone. That was the photo that Erica was talking about. If you look to the top left of the screen, look, there's the sketch. Bottom right, of course, that's your suspect, the defendant. All right, Anya Kane, Kevin Greenlee, Murder Sheet Podcast. Keep downloading, folks, because they're going to have much more. It's not over. It is not over. Erica Morse, great to see you tonight as well. Thank you so much for your insight. When we come back, we've got more. We're going to talk to my friend Susan Hendricks from HLN, who spent a lot of time out there covering this story. And Joseph Scott Morgan will join us as well. We'll get his take on today's developments. Don't go anywhere.
Center. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I stand before you in this church and very place where we held our first briefing nearly 6 years ago, and just hours after the murders of Abby and Libby. Right here. Pulling in today, I wasn't really sure what emotion I would experience. But peace came over me. And I didn't expect that to happen. And I hope all of you, with all the different responsibilities you have from around the planet today, have felt some of that as well. But remember, we're not done.
Powerful words from Doug Carter, Superintendent of State Police in Indiana today. Again, an arrest in the Delphi murders, Abby and Libby. We may be closer to getting some sense of justice, but not a lot of answers today because, as you heard the superintendent say, they're continuing this investigation. Take a listen here. This is Kelsey German, who spoke with Susan Hendricks from HLN, talking about that day back in 2017.
I remember my last words to them. When they were getting out of the car, I made sure they had sweatshirts, and I told Libby I loved her.
What did she say back?
She told me she loved me too, and that she'd see me later.
Wow. Let's bring our guests in. Joining us tonight in Jacksonville, Alabama, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, former senior investigator for the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office, and the host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. And here she is, anchor at HLN, Susan Hendricks. Great to see both of you tonight. A bit of a reunion here. Susan, let me start with you. I know you spoke with Libby's grandparents. Before we get to that, I want to get from both of you your initial thoughts with all of these things developing, you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to today. What are you thinking about right now, Susan?
Well, I spoke to Becky. I called Libby's grandmother when I first heard. And she answered the phone and said, I'm at my nephew's wedding. I'm in Ohio. We drove here, but I'm very excited and I can't believe it, but we don't know what they're going to say. And we don't know exactly who's in custody. So she was still learning this. And then, of course, we hear this. And I was at the press conference in April, Vinny, of 2019. And I remember the superintendent, Doug Carter, in the room saying, we believe he's a local. We believe he's hiding in plain sight. We believe he's in this room, but not answering many questions. So there's so much speculation and so much buildup before today. And when I heard it, I just had a feeling that maybe they wouldn't divulge all the information. And so they didn't. And he did say, I know there's a lot of frustration, but we are moving to the next step. And I did feel for the families because they just want to hear, look, we got the guy, it's over. And they didn't hear that.
Joseph Scott Morgan, your thoughts tonight in everything that has developed since Friday when you texted me with the breaking news.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was thrilled. We've been at this for a long time, and that's nothing compared to what the family has gone through, but we have borne witness to this. You know, every single year we hold out hope. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway today in particular, first off, let me say, I believe that there is going to be a tremendous amount of physical evidence in this case. And the fact that the superintendent said that the lines are still open, that they're still seeking more information. Vinny, I think that kind of dovetailing with one of your earlier guests, I think that the fact reflectively, once the dust is settled, people are going to begin to think about interactions, and it's going to be one of those moments perhaps where there will be this tipping point where a lot of more information is going to come out, and they'll be able to put these this calculus together, if you will, because right now it's been very scattered for all of us. A lot of speculation has run rampant over years. You know, the stories that you hear, the things that you hear. But in this particular case, I think that they are still seeking information. I think that that's important, and this mosaic is going to be massive when they're done with it.
All right, Susan, you spoke with Libby's grandparents about 10 minutes ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a few minutes ago. And I could just tell I've gotten to know them through the years, lucky enough to know them. Just the resilience and how strong they have been through this. And Mike has told me, look, what keeps me going is saying good morning to a picture of Libby in my hallway every single morning and thinking about the last few minutes of what she went through at the end of her life. And he said, look, we thought it would be much different, that we'd be jumping from the rooftops. And Becky said to me, I thought I'd feel elation, but I don't right now. I feel deflated and wonder what my purpose is. Because for so long, Vinny, as you know, close to 6 years, that has been it. They've been handing out flyers, been handing out bracelets, getting the word out, saying, we need your help. Please call in, give us the tips. We need to know. And now that there's someone in custody, they are happy, but they also feel a sense of sadness, as you would imagine. And as you saw, you played that video of Kelsey and I that was in her car, and she drove me from her home to the bridge where she dropped off Abby and Libby. And she has said in the past, look, I wish I was a mean sister that day. She feels guilt. Of course, it's not her fault. She said, I wish it was even colder, right? You go back and say, coulda, shoulda, woulda. She dropped the girls off that day. It was about a 3-minute drive from her home, not knowing, saying, I love you, that would be the last time she'd ever see her sister and Abby again.
Wow. Susan and Joseph Scott Morgan staying with us. We've got more to talk about, plus coming up next hour. On the docket tonight in Broward County, Florida, the sentencing of another convicted mass murderer, the Parkland school shooter. The jury spared his life, but what will happen at his sentencing? Will the killer speak? And will the victims and their families have an opportunity to talk about the impact of this horrific crime?
I think we need to just be honest and say that they found an excuse. I don't think they deliberated long enough, quite frankly.
No.
Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill. Guys. Downhill.
That was one of the clues. I mean, how many times did we see that video of the suspected killer and hear the audio of what he said? Does that match up with the man who was arrested today for the murder of Abby and Libby? I want to show you some video. Apparently, this was shot outside of a mall, perhaps by, I think it's by his wife, by Kathy Allen. Take a look at what happens here. That's him in the passenger seat. Doesn't look happy. Looks like whatever he's doing, all of a sudden he stops doing, sort of closes up the little file folder, whatever he's working on there. Probably not good. And take a look at his jacket. Does that jacket look like the jacket from the Down the Hill guy? Let's bring back in our guest, still with me, Professor of Forensics, Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan, and HLN anchor Susan Hendricks. What are your thoughts about that, Joseph? Will you see him in the front of that crack? Kind of weird, right? That's another weird video. Like he's doing something, all of a sudden his wife shows up, and he goes like this.
Yeah, and to, marrying up with what you said, he was not very happy about that moment in time. And, Vinny, I think that we're going to see quite a bit of things, quite a few things that are going to be connecting whoever did this to these heinous crimes. right now, beginning to think about that. We've had this video evidence and also the sound evidence for some time now. And keep in mind, please, that's only a very small portion of what they actually
let me ask
possess.
you this. Let me ask you this. If they had released a longer piece of that video, would someone like his wife or someone who worked with him at CVS be better able to recognize him? Because it was just that short little video. It looked like he was doing some of this, down the hill. Do you think that may have delayed things, like maybe a little more video and maybe?
It's hard to say. You don't know what the quality of it is, but there are people that do what's referred to as gait analysis. Also, I can almost bet you dollars to donuts that they have had a linguist that has been involved in this case, probably associated with the feds that specialize in listening to voices, trying to track down the kind of regional context for this. That's been floating around for some time as well. But again, people are frustrated over the fact that not more was released today.
Yeah.
However, they're walking a very fine line here, Ben, with what they can and cannot release. We still have other hearings that are coming up specific to this matter.
Absolutely. So, Susan, you spent so much time out there, spoke to the people in the community and the family and everything else. What do you think about the fact that, it took 5 years, they had video, they had audio? Do you think, now that we know it was someone who was right in the town, that maybe it could have moved things along a little quicker?
Yeah, and I think the superintendent called it back in 2019 saying, we've changed direction. We believe he's hiding in plain sight. And boy, was he right there, CVS. And with this, as you both know, there was so much. I mean, when you get a case where you see the suspect walking, his voice, Libby was brave enough to hit record on her phone. And Mike told me, her grandfather, look, we thought that maybe she thought she'd come home and say, Grandpa, look at this weird guy on the bridge that we saw. Hit record, heard his voice, and still a town of less than 3,000 people, cut that in half, 1,200 guys, and still no one suspected this guy.
That is unreal. Justice Scott Morgan, the other thing, and this is a fact that bothers me incredibly. We understand that Libby was, they were talking back and forth with this Kagan Klein on this Anthony Schatz social media that morning. Like, you're interacting with a pedophile that morning, an accused pedophile, child pornographer, whatever he is, right? Child pornographer. And then you are randomly attacked by someone else the same morning that you're corresponding with a child pornographer? Like, what are the odds of that?
Slim. And this is what I believe. These perverts like this, they work by networking. They like to share material. And so if that is the case in this particular case, I think that all investigative parties involved will exhaust all of that linkage. And it's not just going to be limited to this particular locale. One curious thing that I found, Vinny, speaking, the superintendent talked about this. Did you notice a term he used in that presser today that was kind of, it seemed a bit out of sorts? He talked about global partners. And I found that very interesting. He was thanking people, and granted, they've been contacted from all over, but he said that twice in that presser. It really caught my ear. He talked about, global from the perspective of connectivity with people. And I'm really wondering if that's something that they're not looking into, Ben.
Absolutely. Susan, we have about 20 seconds. I'll give you the final word tonight.
Yeah, calling it to talk in terms of what Joseph Scott Morgan was saying, called it a complex investigation, saying we can only give so much information. And I do want to say final words. I'm thinking about Abby and Libby's family members. In that small town, when you're there, you really get the feel of, wow, why can't we find this guy? And we're hoping for justice.
Susan Hendricks, HLN, Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you both so much. We'll be right back. In Delphi, Indiana, big news in the investigation into the 2017 murders of Abby Williams and Libby German. The arrest of a murder suspect who was completely under the public radar for more than 5 years. With so many other potential viable suspects for the defense to now point to, what will this murder trial look like? Can prosecutors win?
We will have an opportunity and day in court when we can present the evidence that we have against him. But until that day, he is presumed innocent.
In Waukesha, Wisconsin, convicted mass murderer Darrell Brooks back in court after being found responsible for the Christmas parade massacre, and once again raising his voice in court as he continues to represent himself. We have the latest.
I just want the truth to be told. That should not be sealed. If everything else can be open to the public, then the public should know that I had a shock device on my ankles.
On the docket tonight in Broward County, Florida, the sentencing of another convicted mass murderer, the Parkland school shooter. The jury spared his life, but what will happen at his sentencing? Will the killer speak? And will the victims and their families have an opportunity to talk about the impact of this horrific crime?
I think we need to just be honest and say that they found an excuse. I don't think they deliberated long enough, quite frankly.
And tonight, a special Halloween edition of our Tank Takes featuring a man in a costume in his mugshot. The costume, Fireball Whiskey. The reason for the arrest? Take one guess. Get ready. This hour of closing arguments starts right now. I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Big day here at Court TV. Big breaking news out of Delphi, Indiana. Finally, after more than 5 years, an arrest for the murder of Libby German and Abby Williams, those two young teenage girls who were murdered February 13th of 2017. Now, the prosecutor was at the press conference today and spoke. This is the prosecutor who'll be in charge of the case. These are murder charges. We're talking about a double murder trial. Let's take a listen to what the prosecutor had to say.
There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. This investigation is still very ongoing. We're keeping the tip line open, the tip email open. We encourage everybody to continue to call in tips, not only about Richard Allen, but about any other person that you may have. For that reason and for the nature of this case, the probable cause and the charging information has been sealed by the court. I've been very clear to everybody that per the court order, we cannot talk about the evidence that's in the probable cause or the evidence that's in the charging information. That will become evident to you at some point and it'll be released, but right now is not that day. Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. The matter's been set for a pretrial on January 13th at 9 a.m., 2023, and a trial date of March 20th, 2023 at 9 a.m. He is presumed innocent. We will have an opportunity and day in court when we can present the evidence that we have against him. But until that day, he is presumed innocent.
You heard it there from the prosecutor. We don't know what the evidence is, what it was that led them to Richard Allen, what led them to this arrest, what led them to charge him with the double murder. So we don't know the prosecutor's evidence, and we'll find out at some point. But I'll tell you what, as we get ready for this trial to happen, I think we have a pretty good idea of some of the defense evidence and where they're going to go in this case. And this, as a former prosecutor, this scares me a little bit. In this case, it really does. I don't think it's going to be easy for prosecutors. Again, you have to prove the case beyond any and all reasonable doubt, which means, is there any other potentially reasonable suspect in the case? My goodness. Absolutely, there are some. Now, how reasonable they are in light of the evidence, we don't know because we haven't heard the prosecutor's evidence. But you know where the defense is going to go with this. There's a whole list of people. Let's go through part of that list. Kagan Klein. It starts with him, the guy behind the Anthony Shots social media site, has been charged with child pornography crimes and was actually communicating with Libby before she died. So she's communicating with a child porn collector of sorts. Well, that's what he's accused of being, and you know the defense is going to paint him absolutely that way and use it against him. And he is actually communicating with her through this Anthony Shots social media site. So that's one place they're going to point. How about the guy in the middle, Ronald Logan, who can't even speak to defend himself because he's now dead, but it was his property where the girls' bodies were found. His property. And by the way, when he spoke with investigators, he was lying about his alibi that day and got someone to lie for him. I mean, this is like, throwing softballs to the defense. Libby's communicating with someone who's, that day with someone who's brought up on child porn charges. The man who owns the property where they're found lies about where he was that day or who he was with that day. And then you've got the third suspect, James Chadwell, who was from nearby Lafayette, Indiana, was sentenced to prison for kidnapping and attempting to murder a 9-year-old girl. Officials say he lured the girl and locked her in his basement before viciously attacking her. And he was looked into as a suspect in all of this, or looked into as a potential suspect early on in this investigation. So there you have three of them. The one all the way on the right convicted of something very similar. The one in the middle has the property. The one on the left communicating the day that Libby was murdered, and he's into child pornography and trying to get girls to do that? Come on. What is this trial going to look like from what we know right now? How difficult will it be for prosecutors? Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us tonight in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. There he is, Al Wunsch III. In Stamford, Connecticut, criminal defense attorney Darnell Crossland. And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, family law attorney Jennifer Brandt on the program tonight. All right, Al, I'll start with you. How difficult for prosecutors, and what do you think this trial is going to look like with what we know right now about the other potential suspects that the defense can turn into suspects in the trial? Not perhaps suspects by investigators, but by the defense attorneys.
Well, first of all, Ben, happy Halloween to everyone out there. I see Darnell came dressed as he always does as a Prudential insurance salesman. Nice costume. Ben, this is a very interesting case, but we have to wait to see what the evidence is. If the evidence is a slam dunk, I'm not worried about the three stooges that they have up there on the wall, because quite frankly, if it's a slam dunk, they're going to be able to get that through. The other three, if I'm the defendant, of course, I'm going to be pointing fingers, especially at the dead guy, because that's just the easiest one to kind of put up there, and especially since he had the property, lied about his alibi and things along those lines, and there's no one there that can really talk to him unless they're going to bring in medium. So under the circumstances, I would be pointing the finger mostly at him, but divesting with the other two might not be a bad idea. But I got a sneaking suspicion that they're holding 4 aces, and this is going to go down real hard.
Darnell, looking at this case, looking at what this trial is going to be like, what are your thoughts tonight?
Well, good evening. I like the orange tie, Vinny. Happy Halloween. Al looks like an Undertaker, though, with that whole black and black tie, black suit thing. I'm not sure what's happening there. But in terms of this case, this is what troubles me with this case. And Vinny, I think you don't really articulate it too much, but I get a feeling that you're so much in the pursuit of justice for the prosecution that you support these arrests. I, on the other hand, believe that sometimes they arrest people to make the public feel safe, I guess, or
It's been almost 6 years, Darnell. They didn't. There's no rush to judgment here.
No, that's the thing. So after 6 years, if you don't have evidence, and it doesn't get stronger because you arrest someone. So when he says these words, this is very much an open investigation. So how does that jive with if it's so open that you're arresting someone when it's so open? I don't care if it takes 6 more years. Shouldn't you really decide that you had some good evidence and now you feel good? They barely get PC these days. They just get real close to probable cause and find a judge half asleep somewhere to sign off on this stuff, and makes the world feel good. And what happens in that? I think you expressed a little intrepidation there, Benny. I heard it in your voice. We're worried because what happens when they grab these people with no evidence, they get not guilty, and now double jeopardy attaches, and we can never get them again. And so it's very risky. And so I'm not feeling too comfortable with this arrest. But I do think it's a tragedy that took place. I do think that we all agree with that. But rushing to grab someone, even after 5 years, with not that good of evidence. And when he starts saying he's presumed innocent, that's also another dog whistle to say,
I mean, that's the law. That's the Constitution that he's sort of reciting there, Darnell. I don't know if you can call the Constitution a dog whistle. All right.
You guys don't throw that out there too much unless you feel a little uncomfortable.
We have to. It's our ethical obligation. Jennifer Brandt, it was also nice to see that Richard Allen is wearing orange for Halloween as well. He's locked up. But what do you think about the fact that it took a while here? It took almost 6 years. And Darnell's right. They're saying it's an open investigation. I'm wondering if that means others are potentially involved. I mean, to me, and the other part of that is now anyone who knows this guy can tell authorities and investigators everything they know about this guy.
That's right. Well, Vinny, happy Halloween, Vinny, and happy Halloween to my fellow panelists, Al and Darnell. Vinny, I think that Darnell's got this one wrong. I think that it took 6 years, and I think they have some very strong evidence against this gentleman. I don't think they would have come forward if they didn't. And I think the idea of keeping the tip line open is because there probably are others, or they suspect that there are others involved with him, and they want the public to come forward. Now that they have identified Richard Allen, maybe the tips will be coming forward with others who may be related to this crime. They have that video of the man that Libby had taken at the time of her death or before her death. They have a voice recording. I don't know if they're pinning it on Richard Allen that he's the person in that video, but maybe it's someone related to this. There was some mention when the recording, it said like, meet me down the hill or something like that on the recording. So it sounds like there may have been more than one person involved. And I think that's why the tip line remains open. But I think they must have some very, very strong evidence against this person. No one saw it coming. No one had previously identified him. He wasn't in the list of potential suspects that you put up on the screen. So there was something out there that they found that led them to this man, and I think they've got their suspect, they've got their person, and now they're just trying to see if there are any others involved.
Yeah, Al, hiding in plain sight in this very small town, about 3,000 people in Delphi, Indiana. But I want you to take a listen to Libby's grandmother here, talking about interaction that they had with the man prosecutors say killed their granddaughter.
There's a report going around right now that this Mr. Allen actually processed some photos for the family at the CVS. Do you know if that's accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay, and that he didn't charge the family when they came in to claim the photos?
That is correct.
Okay.
Al, this is such a creepy fact that he's worked at CVS, processed the photos for the girls' funerals. Processed those photos for the funerals, and then said, no charge. You can have you can just have them. To me, that's a creepy fact. I don't know if that makes its way into the trial, but from my perspective, it really tells the story of how this guy was literally hiding in plain sight.
Literally, you're correct on that, and it is very creepy, especially on Halloween, to see that he's actually handling their photograph of the funeral and things along those. and then, you know, giving it to them on the arm free, even more disgusting. It's just, you know, you're right. You know, it's a small town, and for this guy to have lasted this long is really the question I have. How did this, you know, in a town like this, how wasn't he thought about to begin with? Why is the investigation taking this? It doesn't seem to me that there were, you know, that many individuals. I mean, they came up with 3, but this guy is just personified people.
I mean, you could have investigated every man in the town by this time. I mean, you could have taken a look at everyone who lives there. You know, he was half a mile from their school, Darnell. He was 2.5 miles from the site where they were, where they went hiking that day and ended up getting murdered. Even less than 2.5 miles if you walked it. What are your thoughts, Darnell, about small town trial? This is the county seat. Delphi is the county seat, by the way. So this case could be tried in this small town.
Yeah, well, stranger things that happened. Today, while we were in court, for the first time in my entire career, the prosecution was making a motion for change of venue. And you guys never make that. We always make that motion. But after the jury was seated, the client told the marshals that he knew some of the people in the jury, and that got back to the judge, and the judge dismissed the whole panel. The prosecution jumps up and makes a motion for change of venue. As to the question with small towns, I find that the psychosis here is that everyone knows everyone, so no one's the bad guy. So no one could believe that Ricky would have done this. No one could believe that Billy could have done this. So there's no suspects because there's no one that in these towns that you could imagine could do something like this. So that's why it's so hard for them to really pick the person, even though you said they could have done it quickly because it's such a small town. But again, somebody's related to someone's brother or cousin, and they don't feel like there's no bad guys there. And so I think that's why the delay is there.
You know, Jennifer, the other thing was that we just saw them, there were 2 sketches that look nothing like one another. And I know sketches are based upon someone's recollection as they give it to the artist, and the artist tries to match what they are describing. But 2 completely different pictures. I mean, I could see a defense attorney trying to put that into evidence and say, look, ladies, come on, there's 2 different people, like what's going on here? Or do you think perhaps there's a second suspect involved in all of this?
Well, I do think there's a second suspect, Vinny, but I do think the sketch on the left could be Rick Allen. I mean, that was what he was 6 years ago. He was 44. It could certainly be him. I mean, you know, a sketch is not perfect, but you see some type of resemblance there. The other one on the right seems like a younger guy. And like I said, the voice recorder, they said it was probably someone, you know, between a younger person, probably younger than Rick Allen at the time. So maybe there was somebody else involved. And again, that's why they have that tip line open to see if there's anybody else coming forward. I don't know how they got to Rick Allen, but, you know, there was definitely something there. They were digging in his backyard. They said at the time of the murder there was a lot of blood evidence probably. So, I mean, someone connected the dots for them or something led them to him. And, you know, there might be somebody else out there. So we'll have to see what happens.
And we will continue to track it. You know, they're saying that this trial will be scheduled for next year. We'll see how quickly they do things in